On the 2nd of June of 2025, the police came to your home and they searched it. And on your mobile phone, they found that you'd saved a copy of a 188-page PDF file called Al-Qaeda Training Manual, Complete Version. And they found 3 other files as well, which contained extracts from that training manual. And that manual contains information likely to be of use to a person engaged in terrorism, and it's a criminal offence to possess it. I'm going to set out a little of the background to explain why the police came to your address so that everybody understands. But I must stress that you're being sentenced only for possessing the manual. But in deciding on what's the right sentence, I have to consider all the surrounding circumstances. From April of last year, you were messaging other people on Snapchat, and those messages included praise for Axel Rudakubana, the Southport attacker. And you said in those messages that you wanted to carry out a terrorist-style attack like him, and that you were planning to bomb the Oasis music concert taking place in Cardiff in July. And you claimed that you were trying to make ricin, which is a highly dangerous toxin. And one of your messages asked how to burn people's faces. And you were also searching for information online about a children's playground and about a dance club in your local area. And on 2 occasions you tried to buy a 15-centimetre kitchen knife from Amazon. One of the people you were sending messages to told the police about what you were saying. And about the same time, your mother asked for an assessment by the Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services because she was so concerned about your behaviour. And you went to an appointment on the 2nd of June of 2025, and you told the community psychiatric nurse that you wanted to hurt people and that you'd been researching how to kill people and how to make bombs and poison. And you said you enjoyed watching terrorist acts. The nurse very properly reported all of this to the police. You went home after speaking to the nurse and you carried on searching the internet for information about knives and a local school. And you also sent images of extracts from the Al-Qaeda training manual, which included information about torture methods and explosives and how to manufacture ricin. The police arrived at your house later that same day, and they found the Al-Qaeda training manual on your mobile phone. And when you were later interviewed about that, you accepted that you'd searched for the Al-Qaeda training manual, and that you'd saved it, and that you'd read it, and you also accepted that you'd forwarded it to others. You said to the police that you were sending Snapchat messages because you were bored, and that you didn't mean what you'd said about carrying out attacks or making ricin. You said you just intended to shock people. You did admit that you'd tried to buy knives online, but you couldn't because you couldn't prove that you were over 18. Your mother had hidden all her kitchen knives after finding one in your bedroom. You said that you were unhappy and that you'd been bullied at school and that you'd been experiencing suicidal thoughts. You appeared before the Westminster Magistrates' Court on the 21st of June, and you said that you intended to plead guilty. And you're therefore entitled to full credit, which means a reduction of 1/3 from the sentence that I would have passed if you hadn't pleaded guilty. You were remanded to youth detention, but on the 7th of October you were transferred to Ardernley Medium Secure Unit under the Mental Health Act, and you've been under the care of the psychiatrists there ever since. I have got and have read initial and updated reports from Dr. Katie Dishard-Head under the supervision of Dr. Hamid Hassan at Ardernley. But they tell me that you struggled at school, where you were isolated and bullied. You were assaulted in the secure unit, where you were initially detained. You suffered a broken nose and bruising, and that led to severe anxiety and panic attacks. And you also began self-harming and scratching yourself, putting objects into your ears, which have sometimes had to be removed in the accident and emergency department at the hospital. And you've also developed non-epileptic attack disorder, which means that you've often had seizures. You've been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and that means that you struggle with uncertainty and with social interaction and with communication. You have sensory sensitivities and you like rigid routines. Dr. Hales and Dr. Cunning are uncertain as to the risk that you now pose to others. You told them that you don't now have thoughts about hurting other people, but the youth offending team, using an assessment tool, have assessed the risk posed to others as high. You're also a danger to yourself because you self-harm and you have thoughts of suicide, and you're also at high risk of harm from other people because you have autism and you're vulnerable to being bullied or being groomed and radicalised. There's no clear evidence from any of the reports or any of the other material that you have any specific political or religious or racial ideology. And that leads me to conclude that you have no terrorist connection or motivation. Your motivation appears to have been to emulate the extreme level of violence used by Axel Rudakubana in the Southport attack. And accordingly, I place this offence in what we call culpability category C. I also have to assess the harm that was or might have been caused, and I place this in the highest category, that's category 1. The training manual provides instruction for methods of carrying out specific terrorist activity endangering life. And while I've considered carefully the submissions made by your counsel, my assessment is that harm was very likely to be caused, either by you or by someone else, since you sent the manual to others. The deliberate use of technologies to avoid or to impede detection is an aggravating factor in cases like this, and you used Snapchat, which deletes content by default after it's been viewed, and you used a virtual private network internet connection, which, among other things, would disguise your true location. I can't be sure, however, that you used Snapchat and a VPN deliberately, and so that you could avoid detection. Many people use Snapchat simply because it's convenient, and they use VPNs to protect their private data. So I don't view that as an aggravating factor. There are mitigating factors in this case. You have no previous convictions, and you're young. Your time in custody has been, and will be, especially challenging for you in particular. These are mitigating factors. Your counsel tells me that you're very sorry, and that you wanted me to know that. So I do take into account your remorse as a mitigating factor. I'm going to make a criminal behaviour order, and that will be explained to you in detail, and it'll be given to you in writing as well. It sets out all kinds of things you mustn't do. In particular, you mustn't go to places where children are, such as youth clubs, and you mustn't try to buy knives, and you mustn't keep a knife in your bedroom. There are also rules about using the internet. Now, it's very important that you stick to all of these rules because, again, if you don't, you could be returned to prison. You're also subject to what we call the automatic notification requirements under the Terrorism Act of 2008, and those will be explained to you in detail as well and given to you in writing. In essence, what it means is you have to make sure that the police have got details about where you're living and so on. And you're subject to those for the next 10 years. I've almost come to an end, McKenzie, so will you stand up, please, and I'll tell you what the sentence is formally. Thank you. If you hadn't pleaded guilty, the sentence would have been one of 21 months detention, but I give full credit for your guilty plea, and so the sentence is one of 14 months detention in a young offender institution, with a further period of 1 year which you will be on licence. You'll be considered for release after serving 2/3 of the sentence. And if you're not released at that stage, then you'll be released at the end of the 14 months. But the time you've already spent in detention on remand will be deducted automatically from that sentence. And when you are released, you'll be on licence for whatever period of time remains of the 14 months, plus an extra 1 year. And while you're on licence, it's really important that you do whatever you're directed to do by the people who are supervising your licence. And again, if you don't, then you could be returned to prison.
This complex and deeply troubling case represents a tragic and cautionary tale. McKenzie was not born bad. He didn't come into the world wanting to be a terrorist or aspiring to one day kill people, let alone children. As a teenager himself, when he committed the offence, he was inherently vulnerable to the malign influences that prey on our young people today. online on the internet. The fact that he was heavily influenced by the perpetrator of one of the most horrific attacks this country has seen in recent times is a terrifying indictment of the abhorrent commentary, hateful opinion and violent images that too many of our young people are exposed to on a daily basis via the myriad of online sites, chat forums and gaming and social media platforms. That is the reality of what we are seeing in our casework time and time again. This can no longer be described as an emerging trend. It is routine now for counter-terrorism policing to investigate young people for very serious offending involving a clear online footprint. Now, I recognise there's a valid debate about legislation and the balance that must achieve. And we continue to call on big tech to play a much bigger role in this. But parents and carers also have a role to play. We must accept that our children are freely and regularly exposed to significant risk online. Look, as a father myself, I know firsthand that parents are under a lot of pressure, and monitoring what our kids do online is far from straightforward. But this isn't about censorship, this isn't about privacy, or the modern day equivalent of reading their diary. Diaries were not gateways for predators to exploit. It is purely about us keeping our children safe from significant harm. I really didn't become a police officer to put teenagers in prison. It's not something I want to be doing. But if our kids can access dangerous, highly addictive and influential content, there is a very clear risk that it will destroy their young lives before they've really begun. Whilst I am hugely grateful to my colleagues for stopping a potential attack on young innocent lives, there really are no winners here today. Just a real sense of sadness that highlights the need for us as a society to really grip this issue and finally stop our young people being exploited in this way. Thank you very much.